Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for taking the time out of your day and your evening to be here with us at the Heartland Institute to talk about genetically modified food in a calm, reasoned, and informed fashion, which is not what you always get out in the world. I'd like to welcome you to the Andrew Breitbart Freedom Center here at the Heartland Institute. We're very proud to have named it after such a champion of liberty as Andrew Breitbart, who we greatly admired here at Heartland. Fortunate enough to meet him once, shortly before his death 4 years ago. We got the blessing of his company and his family to have his name permanently on the wall for a place where people gather to learn about freedom and liberty. So we're very honored about that. We also want to wish our condolences to the family and friends of Mike Flynn, who was one of the founding editors of Breitbart News Network. He was the first editor of Big Government, and he passed away suddenly last Thursday. And so a lot of people that knew him, which I did, and he lived in Quincy, Illinois. It was really a shock, and so our condolences go out to Mike Flynn, his family and friends, and everybody at the Breitbart family. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Director of Communications here at the Heartland Institute. If you don't know, Heartland Institute has been around for 32 years. For 31 of those, we were located in downtown Chicago mostly. We escaped there. And for the last 10 months or so, we've been based here in this beautiful new building in Arlington Heights, Illinois, in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, where we feel we're a bit closer to our people. And it's a little easier for you all to get out here and have events, come to events such as this. Our mission since that founding has been to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to social and economic problems, to fight for policies that shrink the scope and power of government, and increase individual liberty, and encourage prosperity through vibrant and true, not crony, free markets. Heartland covers all aspects, key aspects of domestic policy through our centers. 5 centers. We have the Center on Budgets and Taxes. We have the center that we call Consumers for Healthcare Choices. We have a center for school transformation, in which we fight for school choice programs. We have the Center for Constitutional Reform, which is our newest center here at the Heartland Institute, where we're fighting, well, I shouldn't say fighting, we're trying to quell the fighting going on among the right when it comes to the Article 5 movement to amend the Constitution and retake our liberty and our government from the bureaucrats. And then we also, of course, have the Center on Climate and Environmental Policy, under which today's talk sits. We're amazingly effective in this mission. GMO, genetically modified foods or organisms, is a very controversial topic, which may be why we're attracted to it, because the Heartland Institute is we're a controversial organization, especially because of our work on environmental policy. And we're only controversial because we're effective. So you just have to Google us, and don't believe about 97% of what you see, but that magic number. But we're effective because we know that because we get attacked constantly by the left. But if you like what you see tonight and hear tonight in person or watching our live stream tonight, check around heartland.org. In fact, visit heartland.org about this time next month. The website's going to be completely redesigned and easier to use and find all of our research. And so we're looking forward to that and getting your feedback on what we're doing right and doing wrong in that redesign, but I think you're all going to like it very much. We also have a daily podcast, the Heartland Daily Podcast, which you can find on iTunes, in which our managing editors interview some scholars from all across the country to talk about breaking news in those areas that we cover, like budgets and taxes and the environment and constitutional reform and health care. And of course, you can check out our YouTube page where this event and all of our events here are there and available for you to view if you were not able to be here in person. And of course, finally, we have a new feature here at the at the building here in Arlington Heights for the Heartland Institute, and that's the Michael Perry Mazur Library. It is without a doubt the greatest collection of free market and books about free markets and liberty anywhere in the Midwest. We have about 10,000 volumes so far and growing. In fact, we have I think a delivery of books tomorrow that's coming in. We had a delivery of books last week that came in. And in fact, if you have any books in your attic, in your basement, that you lent to your nephew and he never got it back, give him a call. get those copies back because we want this library to continue to grow, because we want it to be a resource for people in the community and for students and for teachers and for anybody who is interested in reading some of the great works of liberty and free market economics. And I invite you to take a browse through the library while you're here. In fact, you can come and pull out and read any book that you would like. And we would appreciate your donations or even just telling people about it, because we think it's an important resource that should be exploited. And finally, the summer is here, of course, and we still have room for interns here. So if there's a young person in your life of college age or even high school, an exceptional high school student, I've had a couple of those in my own program, we'd love to have them here as interns. They're going to learn a lot about free markets and liberty. They're going to learn a lot that they're not learning in college, that is run by Marxists and leftists. So if you want to deprogram that 20-something in your life, bring them here. We're very good at deprogramming. And if these things are important to you and you're not yet a donor to the Heartland Institute, I strongly urge you to do so. We're in this fight together for liberty. We can't do this alone, and the Heartland Institute can't do this alone. We need the support of the people in this room. We need the support of the people watching online, because if you care about these things, if you want to take your country back, take your liberty back, that was given to you by God, that belongs to you. Government's always trying to take it away, increasingly every day. If those issues are important to you, please consider joining the Heartland Institute, even by a small amount, maybe by a large amount, but get involved in the movement and get involved in the Heartland Institute. We're happy to have you join us. Thank you for your attention, and with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, Julie Kelly, who's going to talk about GMOs, genetically modified organisms, basically the food that you see in the grocery store. I was shopping the other day. I'm on a bit of a health plan, and for the first time in years, I spent a lot of time in the fruit and vegetables aisles, looking around. I need some plums. I need a few apples. A cucumber. Goodness, is that what that looks like? Terrific. And so I bought those things, and I actually had a hard time finding the non-organic stuff. I want the stuff that's been injected with things that give me more nutrition, that give me more value for my money. And so I picked up a load of grapes, had to put those down later. That's why I spent so much time. I couldn't find the real food, not the little dirty, grown-in poop food that is overpriced and has the word organic on it. I eventually did find those things and went home with them. But that's what we see now. It's like there's some sort of moral superiority to the word organic. Well, Julie Kelly is going to talk about the organic movement, how that compares to GMO food, which we, for decades, called normal food. And there's actually really good news on this front. Just today, 107 Nobel laureates signed a letter urging Greenpeace, hello Greenpeace, to end its opposition to GMOs, a mindless, unscientific opposition to GMO food. 107 Nobel laureates in fields that study medicine and physiology and agriculture. So take that, Greenpeace, and listen up. As of this afternoon, they had not yet commented, but I'll be checking to see what they have to say about that. And those several of those Nobel laureates will be in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club tomorrow afternoon to give a press conference and explain their actions. And one of the things they're really upset about is that, if anyone here heard of golden rice? You know what that is? Yes, it's infused with vitamin A, which is absolutely vital, especially in poor nations in Asia and Africa, to prevent blindness and other illnesses. You need that vitamin A. And the anti-GMO people are against that because it's screwing around with nature, with natural rice. Meanwhile, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of children go blind and then often die after that because they're being denied this genetically modified rice that could save their lives. And so tonight's talk, and Julie is part of that movement to end that kind of madness and to get real sense into our policy in that field. She has quickly emerged as one of the leading voices in the increasingly contentious debate about America's food system. She's a dogged researcher and fearless writer. Julie has taken on the organic industry, environmental groups, celebrity chefs, and food writers. I can guess about some of those people, I think, for standing in the way of science and progress both here and around the world. She refers to herself as an accidental activist, a stay-at-home mom with a background in political consulting. Kelly wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal in 2014 about the political activism about one of America's well-known celebrity chefs. That op-ed unexpectedly launched her into a food fight of words about everything from GMOs to the National School Lunch Program to the National Dietary Guidelines. She has appeared on the Fox Business Channel, and her work has been published in many publications, including National Review Online, Forbes, The Huffington Post, and The Hill. She is the very definition of grassroots. And from her impact, those are definitely genetically modified grassroots to grow tall, fast, and strong. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Julie Kelly.
Hello, thank you for coming out this evening on such a lovely summer night to listen about GMOs in the organic industry. Jim took about half my speech, so I'm going through, I'm going to rework it. But it's really exciting to be at the Heartland Institute. My background is in Illinois politics. One of my first jobs in politics was working for Chris Lawson, who was the state senator, and I helped open up, so you know he's quite the policy wonk conservative, and so I helped open up his district office after he was elected in 1992, and he was a big fan of Heartland Institute, and so I remember reading the newsletters, and so that was my first job, and I worked for him for a few years, then went to work for Gail Franzen, who was the DuPage County Board Chairman, and he was a less policy wonky than Chris, but if you know Chris Lawson, he was the top of the bar for that. So, so it's really exciting, kind of full circle, for me to be invited here and talk about public policy and politics. It's funny listening to Jim. I spent a few days last week outside of Berkeley, California. I was invited to an environmental conference, one of very few Republicans, talking about how to get Republicans engaged again in environmental issues. And they were extremely smart people, lovely people. I learned a lot, but definitely on the left end of the spectrum. So now I just kind of got knocked back into the other side listening to Jim talk. So I'm trying to find my bearings here a little bit. As Jim said, I do refer to myself as an accidental activist. I do a lot of writing. I'm doing a little bit more speaking, but at the end of the day, I have become an activist on these issues. After I worked in politics for almost a decade, I became a stay-at-home mom. I went back into work for politics. I worked for Dan Cronin when he was running for DuPage County Board Chairman, and worked for him for a few years. Got disillusioned after the 2012 election, and decided I would do something else with my time. So I started teaching cooking classes out of my home, which cooking was my second passion. Although my husband says now that I'm writing all the time, I hardly cook, but I still try to balance that. But at any rate, so then it became this convergence of two of my passions, which is public policy and politics, and food. So I started paying attention to what is maybe some of you have heard called the food movement. And that is a collection. It is really what I also call the culinary elite. So these are celebrity chefs, food writers, organic industry executives, usually on the left end of the political spectrum, who want to dictate to all of us how and what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat. So one day I was watching MSNBC. I do watch that for balance. I try to watch both. And Tom Colicchio was on, and I was a big fan of his from Top Chef, and he was on there ranting and raving about the Farm Bill, how Republicans want to throw people off of food stamps and SNAP, and I thought, why is this chef talking about food policy? So I looked up a little bit more, fired off this op-ed to the Wall Street Journal. Never thought they would publish it, just my old writing instincts kicked in, and they did. So that, as Jim said, opened the door for all of these issues. And so I really started doing a lot more research, and that is what led me to the GMO issue, and particularly how it's related to the organic industry and to environmental groups. So I just did a ton of research on my own, got on Twitter, which I hadn't been on, but it connected me with a lot of people who are very knowledgeable. I talked with a lot of scientists, a lot of farmers, even the media, and then I started writing about it. And I think there was a little bit of a vacuum. I identified early on that this was mostly a political and ideological issue. It's not a science issue. It's not really an agricultural issue. It's mostly dictated by people especially in the environmental groups, who are anti-capitalist, anti-corporate. Everything is targeted towards Monsanto. And so I saw that kind of early on, and that's how I started writing about it, more of a political issue. So I guess for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and I know you see it at the grocery store all the time, what is a GMO? Does anyone know what a GMO is, or you're here to learn? Okay.
Genetically modified organism.
Right. And that's the acronym for it. It's actually a really lousy acronym because it doesn't say a lot. Because, as Jim was saying, everything that we eat has been genetically modified over time. I mean, there's nothing that you go to the grocery store now that is really in its natural state. I remember one of the first graphics that I saw was a wild mustard plant, and it showed how different breeding methods had created kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. I mean, these are things that farmers and plant breeders have been doing for generations. And so even for someone like me who considered myself somewhat knowledgeable about food, taught cooking classes, was very dedicated to, healthy eating and cooking at home, had never really thought about it before. So really, nothing that we eat is so-called natural. As people would say, well, I want to eat food that God created. Well, God didn't create kale. I mean, he created the people maybe who made kale, but I mean, he didn't. Everything that we eat has come from somewhere. So the great thing about genetic engineering and genetic modification is now that we have genetics, and I refer to it as the magic of genetics, scientists and plant breeders can identify much quicker what genes are responsible for what traits, and then they can modify them from there. It doesn't have to take as long for the testing to get the results. So that to me was very exciting. So when people are referring to a GMO right now would be really an ingredient or byproduct that would come from a number of crops that are grown here. Most of the corn, soybeans, cotton, canola, and sugar beets here have been genetically modified for two reasons. One is to be herbicide resistant, so farmers can spray herbicide directly on the plant without damaging the plant and getting rid of the weeds that way. Another is for the plant to be pesticide resistant on its own. And that has led to a big decrease in the use of pesticides on these crops because they produce a natural pesticide. And interestingly enough, the bacteria that's used in the pest-resistant crops is also used in organic farming. So it's called BT, and it's used in organic farming, and so that's what those crops are for. So really any byproduct of those crops, corn syrup, cotton oil, canola oil, sugar. I didn't even know a sugar beet existed. I'd never heard of a sugar beet before. I thought everything came from a sugar cane. Has anybody heard of a sugar beet before? Okay, so I'm stupid. I mean, I had no idea. But more than half of the sugar supply here comes from sugar beets. And so, like I said, I was learning a lot. And I really started at ground zero. I get a lot of accusations all the time now that I'm that somehow Monsanto is paying me off or the farmers are paying me off. I really started without any prejudice at all. And so the more that I learned and researched about it, the less I understood the opposition to it. And so I'm not alone. Almost all scientific organizations around the world can confirm the safety of GMOs and genetically engineered crops. Last month, a major study was released by the National Academy of Sciences, if anyone saw it. It's a 400-page report, very in-depth, really looked at both sides, talked to opponents of GMOs, and concluded that GMOs are safe to eat, that they do not pose any harm to human health or to the environment. It went through a lot of benefits of genetically engineered crops. It disputed any ties between GMOs and a number of diseases, and also talked about the great benefits of what GMOs can bring, not just here in our country, but really around the world, which really is really the crux of has become kind of the reason for my activism. And then I talked to a lot of scientists. I've been to Monsanto. a few months ago, I went to Purdue University, and I met with Mitch Daniels, who I'm sure all of you know who that is. Such an impressive man. He's very dedicated to the work that they do there. He is putting about $20 million into plant sciences research. They're opening up a big phenotype facility there. So what's happening in agriculture is amazing, this precision ag where they can use drones. And I mean, it's not the old, I mean, it is so data driven now. And so they can just do so much research and help farmers be more productive and use fewer resources and take better care of their land. So I met with him because he is a passionate defender of GMOs and agriculture. So it's great to meet with the scientists, and they do amazing work. Half the stuff they say, I have no idea what they're talking about because I was a liberal arts major. Unless they're talking about political science, I just kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, and you know. But that's why I'm here, right? Because they can't talk to normal human beings. They talk to each other, and they speak that language, but I always say I kind of dumb it down. But at the end of the day, the science is great. The bottom line is hundreds of thousands of farmers here, really millions between here and around the world, choose these seeds for a number of reasons. Now, why do farmers choose genetically engineered seeds? Monsanto is not buying them off. They're not brainwashing them. They're not going to their rooms in the middle of the night and zapping their brains and telling them they have to buy these seeds. And the farmers really give the best explanations about why they use genetically engineered seeds. Mostly for higher yields, fewer pesticides, using less resources. It's better for the environment. There's less tillage, so less soil erosion. It's done wonders around the world for cotton farmers in India. It's resurrected the papaya industry in Hawaii, which was pretty much decimated due to a virus. And also BT brinjal, which is eggplant in Bangladesh, where they can grow, these farmers around the world, what they have to deal with is just nothing. We have it so easy here. Not as a farmer. I don't want to be a farmer. I can't even grow a garden. I have weeds coming out of my brick pavers. I don't even know. So I give them all the credit in the world. But farmers around the world who are poor, who are trying to grow crops in their own food, really, very hostile growing climates. They don't have money for pesticides. The pesticides are very toxic. And you cannot combat a lot of crop diseases, especially ones that start underground, with any kind of chemical. So what can be done with genetic engineering to revolutionize our food system on a global scale is really amazing. So then let's talk about the politics, which is what gets me excited. And that is taking on directly very wealthy, very ignorant, I think, organic industry executives. You can read some of my articles and you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. They are multimillionaires. They've made a fortune off of a food system in our country that they insist on referring to as a broken food system, which I always say, well, why don't you look at Venezuela? That's actually a broken food system. We do not have a broken food system, especially when you've made a fortune off of it. So they have politicized this issue for their own benefit. Some of them do it for self-aggrandizing purposes. They want to gain some kind of fame or political power by opposing GMOs. They lie to consumers, especially moms, about the harm that GMOs and their herbicides can do. I've heard organic executives blame GMOs and herbicides for everything from ADHD to autism, cancer, miscarriages, and it's really intended to exploit moms like me, to scare moms away from conventional food, processed food, into buying more expensive organic food, which is not allowed to contain GMOs. And unfortunately, another frustration that I've had, which is part of my activism, is trying to call out reporters who know this and will not confront these organic executives, their front groups. They have many little front groups that they say are nonprofits and they're consumer interest. They're not. And so some of the reporters are aware of this and they won't call them out. So then I call out the reporters, and then I really didn't make a lot of friends that way, but I really didn't care because I have enough friends, and I thought that what I saw was wrong and was scaring people. So that's really what I continue to do. There was a vacuum and continues to be somewhat of a vacuum. The biotech industry, so say the Monsanto's, Dow, they really dropped the ball early on in educating consumers. And I met with one of their top executives at Monsanto, and he admitted as much, and he has done so publicly. They were more concerned with educating farmers about how to use these new tools because it really is still a new technology. It's just about 20 years and constantly changing. And they really didn't see this coming. The organic industry environmental groups who are anti-corporate, unless a corporation's buying out their small organic company, or there's one of them is donating to their environmental groups, they really capitalized on that vacuum and continue to do so. And so, hopefully with all the science that's emerging, the tide is turning a little bit. Jim referred to some really exciting news today about the Nobel laureates who are calling out Greenpeace for their opposition, particularly their opposition to golden rice. Golden rice is not the only crop that's out there, but it has become kind of a proxy in the global battle over GMOs, unfortunately. But just yesterday, the U.S. State Department held a ceremony and they awarded a team of researchers the World Food Prize for a vitamin A-enriched sweet potato that has been adopted in several countries in Africa to fight vitamin A deficiency, which Jim referred to, which affects about 250 million preschool-aged children, particularly in the global South. It blinds about 500,000 children every year and kills quite a few of them. I mean, it's really a problem. It's funny in this country, and this is, again, where I get really angry at environmental groups and organic people who oppose GMOs. We just took vitamin A off of our food labels because it's not even a concern here anymore. So here we are in a wealthy country, well-fed, overly fed country that doesn't have to worry about vitamin A. Anyone who lives here who wants to take those tools away from kids, from poor farmers, from pregnant mothers, take that away, I think they should be ashamed of themselves. So as you can see, when I get the most passionate about how this technology can be applied on a global scale. Europe is doing a lot of damage to the movement. The EU just had a big battle over relicensing glyphosate, which is Roundup. It is becoming a political issue. If you haven't heard glyphosate, you will, because the fear merchants are now trying to get away from GMOs because the science is so powerful. So now they want to scare people about glyphosate, which is the herbicide really used in Roundup. And so the EU, a lot of countries are permitted to grow genetically engineered crops, although they do import GMO grain from here. So it's a little hypocritical, but unfortunately what happens in Europe trickles down to particularly African policy. And of course that's where this is needed the most. So just real quickly too, the big issue here is labeling. GMO labeling. I'm sure you've read or heard something about that. You see a lot of GMO labels. On Friday, Vermont will be the first state, Vermont, 600,000 people. Bernie Sanders lives there. I mean, he represents the people there. was the first state to approve mandatory GMO labels. So that law kicks in on Friday. It's been already a debacle. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, our politicians in Washington are wasting an inordinate amount of time and resources on GMO labeling. The Senate just came to some kind of compromise bill about a mandatory GMO label. So with everything going on in the world, you should be happy that there are high-profile senators who are actually worried about whether you should have a label on food that tells you absolutely nothing. And so that bill is working its way through, and hopefully it won't pass. But anyway, it is definitely a political issue. There's great potential behind it. I encourage all of you, if you for yourselves or your kids, grandkids come home and they start telling you how evil Monsanto is and how evil farmers are and they want to kill all of us. Hopefully you can direct them to either some things that I've written or some much better websites to help them become more informed on the issue. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to answer questions. I hope there are some. Or debate. I thought I was going to have a debate. I was really excited about that. But if anyone wants to debate too, I like that. So, yes. Oh.
With respect to Vermont's labeling law and so forth, just asking,
Yeah.
shouldn't people have the right to know what is going in to, like the labels we have today on ketchup? Or, I mean, some ketchup is organic, some is soybean. Anyway, the point is, don't people have a right to know what's going in their food? They're going in their bodies with their children. Your children.
Right, and that is the kind of the mantra of the pro-labeling organization of advocates. I don't really know what it would tell you. There's a few different GMOs. So if you have a box of cereal that has 30 ingredients and says that it's made with genetic engineering, you're not going to know, unless you are very educated, what ingredients have been come from a genetically modified source. Sugar from a sugar beet and sugar from sugar cane is no different. It's still sucrose at the end of the day. There's no DNA in sugar. There's no DNA in corn syrup. It has already been way processed out. The labels aren't designed to tell you anything. The labels are designed to scare people that there's something wrong that you should avoid and to buy organic or non-GMO. So if you want to go down that road, then we should be telling people, like Jim alluded to, about how organic is grown in manure, or what kind of pesticides and herbicides are used in organic, because despite what people think, there are a lot of farm inputs that go into organic farming. Or should we let consumers know, the same point, that organic, if you're buying organic meat or organic dairy, that animal has been fed imported organic grain from China, India, or Turkey, or Romania. So you open up then the door, like I said, for a political issue. If you want to know what's in your food from a nutritional standpoint, calories, fat, sugar, for your health, GMO label tells you none of that. It has nothing to do with health, it has nothing to do with nutrition, it has nothing to do with safety. And we're in a room full of people, committed to free markets and liberty. The federal government dictating what should be on every package of food, how that has thrown the food industry up in arms just for Vermont, and seeing companies scramble to get rid of GMO ingredients, which is actually the end result that the anti-GMO movement wants. They want to scare companies to get rid, and some of them have. Hershey's is getting rid of sugar beet sugar. There's no reason to get rid of it, except for the fact that they want to say that they're GMO free, even though the sugar is identical. There's nothing that you're telling consumers. And again, if you say that there is, then you can open the door to a lot of other inputs, a lot of other things that consumers should know.
Okay, thank you. And again, raise your hand for a question. I have one here from online in our chat room. Kirk Wilson, as promised, asking your question. What is the consensus on the maximum sustainable world human population, and what impact will GMO foods have on the ability of the Earth to sustain a higher population base? Now, you may not be a global demographer, but I think you might at least be able to talk to us about how GMO is feeding the world.
Well, I do you see a lot of that as a rationale for GMOs with the expected world population of 9 billion by the year 2050. How are we going to increase? I just saw it last week, actually, an agricultural expert who said we are going to have to double the yield on every acre of land to feed a growing population. So how are you going to do that? You're not going to do it with organic food. You're just not. So you need to have plants that are able to create greater yield, use fewer inputs, and be grown in the hostile climates where the population growth is really going to occur. And so this is not the only solution. Okay, this is a big solution. It's a big tool in the toolbox, as they say. To eliminate it for no reason except for political and ideological considerations, it's really inhumane. If farmers want to choose conventional or organic, that's fine. But why would you take this tool away from farmers, away from people who need it? There's no good reason to. So it's definitely a big part of the puzzle.
Hi, I have a sort of a related question. Without really trying, I have become aware of a genetic a genome editing technology called CRISPR.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And Time Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, places like this are saying that there's a very cheap way, very inexpensive way, almost consumer cheap, to do this kind of genome editing in fauna as well as flora, and therefore we could eradicate diseases, et cetera. At the very same time, they report this promise, which of course would apply in the agricultural industry. There is also this scare tactic: are we going to cure Huntington's disease and then create Frankenstein? So, how do you look at this when you now see that there's the cost of doing this has been driven way down?
CRISPR is very exciting. So what CRISPR is basically a gene editing technique. It was developed by two women scientists in California, and it's very promising. They can identify a gene that is expressing a certain trait or causing, and they can basically edit it. So they can cut it out or they can replace it with other bits of genetic material. And so it's not transgenic, really. So that is opening up a whole new door, because really when you're talking about GMOs, mostly you're talking about transgenic technology. So this would just be within that gene and genome. So it's very exciting. It's really new. I think that there's great potential. I think there's some reason to be a little bit cautious. I only really focus on how its ag uses instead of human uses, but I know that there's some concerns about that too. But that's just a whole new. That's why this technology is expanding, escalating so quickly, that there's so many exciting things that are happening. And when you look down the road where you could be 10 or 20 years from now in terms of animal welfare would be a great example of that. If you can kind of switch off the genes that carry certain viruses. I know that they're looking into that for chickens to avoid bird flu, for pigs to not carry the respiratory diseases. So yeah, it's really, there's really some exciting opportunities out there, and that's one of them for sure.
My question has to do with navel oranges. I understand navel oranges are a genetically modified food. And when I was making a talk before some school children about the fact that I was in the Navy, in the Naval Reserve,
I thought you meant
somebody there is a kind of orange that's called a navel orange, which supposedly is easy to peel. But some of the school children asked about this, if there was a connection between navel oranges and guys on Navy ships having scurvy. So if you could comment on the navel orange primarily.
I don't know anything
don't know
about it. I'm sorry, no. I mean, I assume that at some point it was bred.
No,
there was some traditional breeding involved, hopefully not with any naval officers. But
it's some kind of crossbreeding between different types of oranges.
Probably, yes.
But I don't know if that
specifically.
counts for genetically modified or not.
Well, really what they're talking about is adding genes from outside, not traditional crossbreeding. So you're adding genes from outside of their traditional, that plant species, say. So I don't think that would count technically as a GMO. But I'm going to look into it, find out.
Identify yourself before your questions so our speaker knows you.
George Clues. I'd like to follow up on the first question. Let's say you get a box of cereal. Now, admittedly, the sugar is sugar. The molecule doesn't change because it's just carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. But if we look at, let's say, sweet corn, and we look at sweet corn that we used to buy 40 years ago, I mean, we'd get it from the field, we'd rush home, we'd boil it, and then we'd eat it and say it tastes great.
Right.
You let it sit for a couple of days and it's all starchy. I mean, now you can buy it, it's a couple of days old, you keep it in the fridge for a couple of days, you boil it, and it tastes like you're eating sugar. It's really great. Now,
Wasn't
but
sure.
if you just look at the corn itself, you'd forget about the pesticides. What exactly is it that's been done to the corn, or maybe to the enzymes or whatever, through genetic modification compared to what was done 40 years ago when they were developing the same kind of same kind of corn that retained the sugar longer? I mean, what is the
Right.
difference in the development techniques?
Well, I'm not sure what happened to make sweet corn sweeter. I mean, that would have been farmers or plant breeders that would have done that. Here, in terms of genetically modified corn, there are two traits. One is what I was explaining, the BT corn, which is with BT, a naturally growing bacteria that is added to the corn that allows the corn to produce make its own pesticide, really. So what it does is eliminates the European corn borer. It fights that off, so you don't have to spray a lot of pesticides on the corn. So it does that. Now, there are other plants that do that naturally, too. But that's one example. And then the other trait with corn that would be genetically modified would be Roundup Ready corn, where the corn has been bred to tolerate direct spraying of Roundup, an herbicide, on it. So you don't have to go between the rows. It's a little bit less intensive. So those are the two corn, genetically engineered modified corn that is out there now. Now, most of that we don't eat. Most of that is used for animal feed, for ethanol, for other purposes. So there is a sweet corn, a genetically engineered sweet corn. It just came on the market, I think, last year. But most of what we've been eating sweet corn has not been genetically modified in terms of this. So yes, I'm not exactly sure what breeding methods brought the sweet corn sweeter, but it is good. It's really good. Yeah.
Okay, I've got the microphone. I'm Diane Bast. I work here
Oh,
at
yeah,
Heartland.
Diane. Yeah.
Hi, I've
Hi.
edited some of your stuff for Heartland's publications.
Yeah.
So your description just now of one of the genetic modifications to the corn is that it can withstand having Roundup dumped all over it. What does that do then for the people who are then eating the corn? Isn't there some concern that now all of this Roundup is on the food that we're eating?
Well, no. And first, let's not. I'm gonna argue with you on the word dumped, okay? Because farmers get very upset when you say dumped or doused. Okay, they're very careful. Farm inputs and chemicals are extremely expensive. Okay, so they don't just go around and dump and woo, let's have fun with Roundup. I mean, it's very carefully applied. My understanding, most of it is applied before, so it keeps the weeds from growing. So it's not like they're going through just spraying right before you eat it. And so that. I mean, there's not a concern that you're spraying it with Roundup and then you're going right to buy it, to go eat it. So that's why the farmers use it, and they use it on corn and they use it on sugar beets, and so they're very careful with their applications. But also, Roundup and glyphosate is extremely safe it's been tested repeatedly. There's a lot of talk about now, and of course that's not the only herbicide and chemical that's used on farms. I mean, there's a lot of different farm inputs that are used. That is the most controversial one. It's the one that people really only know about. It's been tested extensively, and in fact, the EPA, this is one thing that I wrote about, the EPA just released a report saying that it's not carcinogenic, it's not tied to a number of different cancers. Farmers use it. This is also what I always go back to. Farmers eat the food and live at the land where they're using these farm inputs. Their children are there. It's been in their family for generations. Why would they douse or dump costly chemicals onto their onto their crops if it was going to cause any kind of harm. And so I think that is it. I understand that that's something that people are afraid of. I think in all of my research and writing, it's one thing that you kind of go, well, how do we really know? How do you know that it's safe? Well, there's a lot of testing that's done, and there's a lot of farmers that have used it, and they use it safely and they use it cautiously. So I'm less concerned about that than I think the manure that's used in organic food are also residues that are found on organic produce, which the USDA tested and found pesticide residues on about 40% of their samples. But we don't know there's a list of organic not chemicals, but pesticides, herbicides, fungicides that are allowed. But as far as if you ask somebody, well, what is used on organic produce, they wouldn't be able to tell you. But everybody knows what Roundup is, so it's kind of a target. But yeah, so I would say not dousing, and I would say that it's been tested and used now for many decades safely.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Ariana, and I actually work here at the
Hi.
Heartland Institute. How do you respond to critics who dismiss studies that find GMOs to be positive or at least neutral because these studies are largely funded by big food corporations and conglomerates?
So give me an example. What do you mean?
Well, I see like on the blogs and the blogosphere and things like that, that they will say, this new study comes out and says that, GMOs are, like what you said, safe, but oh, beware, because this organization or this food company, they paid for this research. They paid for these scientists to come to that conclusion that GMOs are safe, because these companies have a vested interest in making sure that GMOs are considered to be safe by the public.
Right.
So how do you respond to that and say, well, regardless of who's funding it, perhaps the research is still sound,
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of that in social media. Scientists also bristle at the fact that they could be bought off, for the most part, by a corporation. And let's be clear too, this happens on both sides. The organic industry has scientists who aren't even, say, plant scientists, but they're some other kind of scientist or doctor, and so they refer to them as to conduct research that's actually funded by the organic industry, and I've written about that as well. But the National Academy of Sciences, nobody is buying them off. That's a 400-page report that took 2 years, and they talked to scientists and advocates on both sides. The international science organizations, the American Medical Association, you can go down the line. You don't have to look at any corporate studies, so to speak. You can look at governmental agencies, scientific organizations, medical communities who have done their own research or looked at the science, looked at the data and the studies, and have come to their own conclusions. So unless you have a specific study that you know of that was paid for by a corporation, a scientist who I'm not aware of, I wouldn't know specifically how to answer that, except just to look at the other kind of the more independent science organizations.
I have a question and a comment.
Yes.
And this is sounding like I'm in a hurricane. Is this a time when maybe we should be going back and taking a look at what we have forgotten or taken off the market because we thought it was threatening in farming, agriculture, and related industries? Why? I'll start in the late 1940s and early 1950s. The largest housing of sugar beets was in Mount Prospect, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
On the west side of town, which was 2 blocks from downtown at that time, there were 990 residents of Mount Prospect, and the sugar beets came from probably as far away as 40 or 50 miles from Mount Prospect. On Wilkie Road, you would have seen DeKalb signs on every cornfield. This was nothing but cornfield and farms. Now, it seems in my strange memory now, a few years later, that the corn was wonderful. No, we didn't keep it for 4 days, but we probably kept it for 3, maybe in the ice box. But somehow that corn tasted, what we're trying to get now is corn that tasted like it did then in our memory.
Right.
My question is, do we go back and take a look at what we have outlawed, DDT and other kinds of things that we thought were going to kill us all? And has that modified what we are doing today and affected what you are doing? Because I think what you're doing is terrific, and I don't think very many people know about it, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, there is, to your point, and if I'm understanding what you're saying, but there's a kind of a longing for a past that people think that they want, especially young people who were never there, you know. 25-year-olds who think that, no, right, well, okay, 35. But there's this, you know, where farming is romanticized, where this belief that, you know, Michael Pollan, who's a writer, don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't identify or your great-grandmother. Well, I talked to my grandparents. My grandfather just passed away a few months ago. He was 92 years old. He grew up on a farm in Louisiana, and I'll tell you, he has no fond memories of that. None. I mean, he's a tough guy, but he would come to tears thinking about missing school to have to go work on the farm and only having fresh fruits and vegetables, to your point, you know, maybe 3 months out of the year. So what the food system that we've created, is it perfect? No. Is it really good and safe and accessible and affordable? Yes. Where it wasn't. I mean, I just remember growing up, you know, I'm from the suburbs originally, you know, growing up in Darien and Naperville, and corn was a big thing. That was exciting to get in the summertime. But that was the only time we got it. You know, there wasn't corn year round. You got it out of a can if you wanted corn. And so now you go to the store, however it's stored, it may not taste exactly the same as it does when I go to my farmer's market and they're literally taking it right off of the truck from the field. I can eat that in the car. I don't even need to cook it. But if I feel like I want corn in December, I can get it. And so that is really a testament to our agricultural community and to our food system. So yes, I think there's, you know, fond memories. I hope that I'm answering your question. I feel like maybe I'm not.
There were fertilizers at that time, but were there methods of farming and not just old grandma's tales or grandpa's, but real methods that we have now overlooked and could be resuming again if we only knew to do so and had the laws that allowed us to do so?
Well, I think what chemicals have replaced is labor. I mean, that's why, you know, 2% of our, we have, 2% of Americans are in agriculture and farming. I mean, that is a tiny, tiny number compared to the rest of the world. So what does that mean? It means the rest of us don't have to go grow our own food. It means people who are farming can use chemical inputs, or now are using technology to great advantage, where they can release their children to go to school and study or pursue other professions instead of, you know, really what had to be. You had to stay on the farm. I think that raises a good question too that some people have talked about. You know, my generation, particularly then millennials, are so disconnected from agriculture now. I mean, they will really be the first generation that would not have a parent or grandparent or someone they could connect to that has had a farmer in their family for the most part. So now they can idealize what all that means. And so that's why they're making really unreasonable demands. And of course you have the culinary elite who's buying into that because they don't go to grocery stores. They're not packing lunches. They're not making dinner like the rest of us normal human beings are, because they live in Manhattan and they think they have a rooftop garden and suddenly they know all about, you know, what it's like to grow corn in the Midwest. They don't. But they get paid a lot of money and they get a lot of TV interviews for talking about it. The culinary elites on the left who insist that this is a broken food system, I find really offensive. And I find it offensive not just for myself, I find it offensive for American farmers who work so hard and who are really criticized these days. And they really should be championed for this food system that all starts with them. So,
Yes, here, here.
got on my high horse there. Grandpa would be proud.
Yeah, I love the show Top Chef, and I can't stand what Chef Calicchio
I don't
is
watch
doing
it
with that.
anymore.
No.
No.
Uh,
You better not either.
All right.
And
I'll
no,
just-
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
All
Just
right.
don't tell me.
Anyway, here's a question from Simon online. Question, and I hope this makes sense. The anti-GMO group is always going back to the study about rats that was discredited many times. Is there a similar study that force-fed rats but did not show the same quote-unquote effect?
Not that I know of. No. There might be, but that was a rigged study that was retracted. Unfortunately, once you have pictures of rats with huge tumors and you have, GMOs next to it, it's hard to get rid of. But yeah, that's Seralini study. Yeah.
Okay. Raise your hand if you have a question. I'm going to take another one online. I thought that would be quick.
Yeah.
This is
No.
from Susan Francino. Hello, Susan. Are all GMO fears completely unfounded? Are there really no examples of modified crops that have had a negative effect on people or the environment?
That's a really good question, because I check myself on that sometimes too, because you become so convinced. You want to kind of make sure that you're doing the right thing. Not as far as genetically modified foods. I think that people, to Diane's point, are more concerned about the chemical inputs that are used on them. And there has been some weed resistance due to the Roundup Ready crops that Monsanto and the other corporations are trying to remedy. Super weeds or weed resistant is not new. It happens in all farming, but now they're trying to kind of reconsider that crop. I feel like, and I don't know, but with CRISPR and the new emerging genetic technologies, there might be something down the road where they could replace the Roundup Ready crops. It's something that I think would alleviate a lot of the concern, because I think the Roundup Ready is the biggest public concern. People know about it. So, I mean, I'd like to say no, that or that the fears, most of the fears are unfounded. But I'm not a scientist or an expert in plant breeding. But I do know the people that I've talked to and met with, and they're very sincere in their work and passionate about what they do. And so, they live on this earth too. They have kids and families, and so I always go back to, I think that they want to do the right thing. And a lot of these crops are just tested over and over. There's so many crops that are tested that will never reach the market because of the fear. And unfortunately, the fear is winning the day. But I hope that answers her question.
Number one, have you read the book Seeds of Deception?
Mm-mm.
Recommend it, but this is just a comment from this study you referred to earlier, the NAS recent study.
Yes.
Make a long story short, on chapter 6, page 66, and just summarizing, it says, the genetic engineering of crops has not resulted in any rising output since the beginning of the GMO movement in the United States. And I'm not saying it's yes or no, but this is from the report, and I would just wonder what your comment would be.
So repeat that again.
The yield has not gone up.
It actually has.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, this is
And that's
from,
a misinterpret. Okay, but
this
read
is from
it.
chapter 6, chapter 6,
What is
page
the quote?
66.
What does the passage say?
Okay, I'll read it. I didn't want to bore you, but it's.
Oh, no, not at all.
It just says,
Please, I talk all night about this.
quote, the nationwide data on maize, cotton, or soybean in the United States do not show a significant signature of genetic technology on the rate of yield increase.
Right. So what they're talking about, and this was a big selling point by the anti-GMO people, the one that you just brought up, is that yield continues to increase, But they can identify the rate of yield increase can be attributed to genetically engineered crops, say over, I believe it was 50 or 60 years. Now, I looked at that study, and I looked at the data points. There aren't specific data points attached to the yield. So you still see yield going up, and in some years you see it going down. But it can be attributed to different machinery coming through or technology coming through. But when you have a crop that doesn't require as many farm inputs, and it saves your crop from pests that eat it and destroy it, that is protecting the yield. So that was a little glitch in it, but there are very few most of the farmers who use the genetically engineered seeds will say, well, it helps my yield because it protects my crop. And so I don't have as many yield losses. But I looked at the data from that, and I believe that those data points are through 2011. Do you have it with you?
No, of course not.
Oh, I don't. Oh, well, you sounded like
wait,
you.
Wait. No, of course not. I don't have the whole book. This is a
No.
summary.
But you had that passage, right?
Yeah,
So
well-
I believe that in the report that went up through 2011. So I went back to some farming reports, soybean and corn, looking from 2011 through 2015. The yields are going up significantly. In 2014, they had the highest yield for corn and I believe soy ever. So can that be attributed to, could be a number of factors to pinpoint it on genetically engineered seed. But it's certainly one reason why it could be whether, that all the factors were working at one point. But why do farmers choose the seeds then? Money for who? But why? They cost more money. So why would they, if there's no benefit to them or they're concerned about rate of yield increases, then why do so many farmers, and why are farmers not taking up organic farming? Because, and they're not.
Money.
Will they get more money for organic crops?
It costs a lot of money to field.
Exactly. It's very cost intensive, organic, even though they get a higher premium for what they sell. But because these crops require less labor, less inputs, that's why. So,
But if somebody has a farm that has in the family for generations, and somebody comes along, not picking on Monsanto, but somebody comes along and pays five times what it's worth, they're going to sell out.
who's going to sell out?
They're going to sell out.
To who?
I mean,
I don't think Monsanto buys farms.
Yeah, you indicated earlier that farmers are selling out to corporate interests. Well, and I'm just saying
No.
that naturally they would. If the money was enough, they would. I mean,
No, I don't think I said farmers were selling out to corporate interests. I said, why would they buy the seeds if there wasn't some benefit?
I don't mean to dispute that.
No, I'm just trying to be clear. I just wanted to.
Well, what I heard was that you indicated that organic farmers were selling out.
I'm sorry,
selling
organic
their land
companies.
to other
Organic,
interests. Yeah,
organic companies were selling to
Yeah,
large food
exactly,
corporations.
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
And if somebody paid 5 times what they paid for it, anybody would buy it.
Oh, more power
That's
to
all
them.
I'm saying. That's
More
all I'm
power
saying.
to them.
Exactly.
But don't turn around and criticize other people who want to make money, which is what
I'm
a lot
not-
of them
I'm
do.
not-
Oh, not you. The organic people are. The organic companies who are bought out by big corporations. Then don't demonize other ag companies or other food companies for trying to make money when you have. So they can sell, that's great for them. But then don't turn around and say how bad, and really what I was referring to, don't demonize our food system that has made you a multimillionaire by a big food company that's bought yours. Say Stonyfield Yogurt is really who I'm thinking about. Gary Hirschberg, who is a leader in the anti-GMO movement, who sold his company for a lot of money to Dannon, and so, which is great. But don't go around then telling women that their kids are going to get ADHD because of pesticides that Monsanto is selling or herbicides that they're selling, and trying to make money when he's done it himself. So I just don't like the hypocrisy of it. Everybody should make money. I'm all for making money. It's great. Just make sure it's all even. But as far as your point to the yields, you could also argue, I mean, there are crops that, a lot, sugar beet's a great example. I've talked to a lot of sugar beet farmers. They've switched, I mean, it's almost 100% genetically modified sugar beet because it's so much easier for them. The yields are higher. They don't have to worry about crop losses that they did before. So,
My name is Art Ellingson from
Yeah, hi,
Arlington
Art.
Heights. My comment is about why are they increasing yields of food. It's because of the carbon pollution in the atmosphere. As carbon dioxide goes up, amazing thing happens at the farmer's field. The crops get bigger. And so if you double the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, food production goes way up. If you triple it, it goes up even more.
I have not seen that.
And in terms
I'm
of
gonna
stuff that kills herbicides, comment on the chemical commonly known as Agent Orange and what
Yeah.
that is and what that did.
I am not an expert on Agent Orange. I don't know. It has nothing to do with what I write about or research now. So, I mean, if you want to share with somebody, with everybody, what you know about Agent Orange, but I'm not an expert in that. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you said someone made a correlation
someone had made a correlation you mentioned between some yogurt and ADHD. Is that true? And who would make that correlation and what do they base it on?
That would be the executive, the chairman and owner of Stonyfield Organic Yogurt, which is Gary Hirschberg. He is as I said, a leader in the anti-GMO movement. He's a big proponent of GMO labeling, not for transparency, not because he thinks people have the right to know. He wants people to buy organic food, and so this is his way of scaring people. I have watched way too many Gary Hirschberg videos, which I should stop doing because they just make my blood pressure rise. He has, there's videos where he's actually said, and this is on a parenting website, he has a series of videos where he blames the herbicides used on GMO crops for ADHD, rise in autism. I believe he linked it to cancer and miscarriages, and he's said this before. There's no study that's done. There's no science behind him. But it sounds, here's what sounds good. You know, these so-called GMO crops have occurred the last 20 years where, you know, we're dousing or dumping chemicals all over crops, and autism rates are rising. So it must be because of the farm inputs. It must be because of agriculture. It must be what we're eating, what our kids are eating. So, you know, as mothers, it's, you know, that makes you scared. As soon as something's wrong with your child, you go immediately to what they're eating. I mean, we've all done it. We've all taken food away or eliminated dyes, or you can't have sugar, you can't. So they know this, and so people like him capitalize on it. There's no studies that indicate, in fact, the NAS report goes through GMOs and a number of health ailments and diseases. There's no connection, no science. Same with glyphosate. The EPA report that was posted and pulled shows no correlation between glyphosate use and a number of cancers. But, you know, they know that fear sells. And so, unfortunately, like I said, they got a head start on it. And it's very hard to undo that fear and to try to throw scientific reports at people, at moms who just say, well, wait, this kind of makes sense to me. But yes, he has. You can Google him. He talks a lot.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions, so if you want to raise your hand, we'll come to you in a moment. But I have a question myself, and it's just the idea of, it seems all the movement now is on GMO labeling. You know?
Right.
And so we have menus at McDonald's and other places where it's mandated in a lot of places where the calories have to be up there.
Mm-hmm.
What's the big deal? Why not have things labeled as GMO and things labeled organic? Why is that a bad thing?
Great question, and this could address a little bit what you were asking for about the Vermont law. So the Vermont law requires that all food producers label their food as contains genetic engineering or made with genetic engineering. What that means, but there are also a lot of exemptions in the law. So here's what's going to happen, and this is why national labeling may never happen, and I hope it doesn't, because they exempt things like cheese, and they exempt things like beer. Why? Because Vermont is a big producer of those. Most of the hard cheese that you eat has genetically engineered rennet in it, but they've excluded that in Vermont. Well, why? If you want to be transparent, you want to tell people what they're eating, why are you excluding that? So small food producers, and I've talked to a few in Vermont, they have to go through their entire supply chain to see whatever ingredient, where it came from. There was a pasta maker I talked to who eliminated canola oil that he was using and replaced it with olive oil, which was more expensive for him, and olive oil has to be imported. So they have to go through their whole supply chain. They also have to have on file a sworn statement that they can show the Vermont Attorney General that their food, that they are certifying that nothing in their product has anything that's been genetically engineered or from a genetically engineered crop. A sworn statement on file. If their labeling is incorrect, they can be fined by the Vermont Attorney General $1,000 per day per SKU. That's not even per product. That means if you have a product at this store and over here, you as a small medium, now how funny is that for Vermont? You know, they want everything to be local and locally produced and locally sourced. So that just pushes the small food producers who are worried that somehow they've mislabeled $1,000. Then consumers can also sue. So what you're going to have is consumer groups led by organic industry and the environmental groups pushing, making sure that these companies have labeled, but for what? What is it? What difference does it make if the pasta you have has canola oil in it or olive oil in it? It's not, and one is imported and one is locally here. What difference does it make if you eat a Hershey's Kiss that has sugar in it from a sugar beet or from cane sugar? Cane sugar that's been imported from Mexico or Brazil, who knows, which is far worse for the environment, by the way, than sugar beets are. So the Vermont law, I think, will be a really interesting test case to see how Coca-Cola, I believe, announced this week that they're going to pull some of their product from Vermont shelves because I just saw it briefly. I didn't have a chance to talk to anyone or communicate with anyone at the company, but because it has corn syrup in it. And so you would have to say. At the same time, most consumers don't know what a GMO is. There's very few studies. There was just a report released this week that said less than half of the people that they surveyed wanted GMO labeling. This has all been manufactured. They try to say that it's a grassroots movement. It is not. It has been completely manufactured. Open-ended surveys about what you want labeled is in the single digits for GMOs. And again, if you open up the door for GMO to pick winners and losers in the marketplace, which is really what this is doing, then you're going to have a really slippery slope. Then I would push for labeling, like I said, imported organic. If the animal ate soybeans from India or from corn from China, I mean, that's where organic grains are coming from. So hopefully that's a little bit more in the Vermont law.
This is going to be the last question. Hi, Veronica Harrison,
Hi.
Marketing Director here at the Heartland Institute, and a mom.
Yes.
And so the targeted audience for the anti-GMO movement, based off what you taught me this evening,
Yes.
is for moms, and
Right.
to terrify the living crap out of us
Yes.
regarding what we feed our kids. I feel like I'm at the grocery store making life decisions,
Right.
and I'm deciding ground turkey versus ground beef,
Right.
and skim milk versus 2%.
Right.
And it's insane. And of course, I'm on a budget for the next 18 years, right? So I'm always cognizant of what I'm feeding the children, how I'm feeding the children. What kind of advice do you have for moms like me who just really want to do the right thing, save money, and
Yes.
keep her kids healthy?
Right. So I would say stop worrying too much is number one. That to save money, there's no science or studies that say that organic is safer, healthier, more nutritious for you. There's none. In a lot of regards, it's not even better for the environment. So don't feel compelled to buy organic for those reasons. I mean, the best thing to feed your kid, feed them how. I think a big problem, this is a whole other subject, is we're trying to apply adult diet standards to kids. Kids don't want to eat the way that we don't want to eat that way. Okay? When I go to Mariano's and I get one of those croissant, the donut, like I'll treat myself once a month with the cream filling, I could jump up and down in the middle of the store. I have to stop myself from just devouring it right there. I don't feel that way when I go get broccoli. I'm like, broccoli, I have to have it this week. I don't feel that way with any fruit or vegetable. That French fries, okay, but we force ourselves to eat healthier, right? Because we know we want to watch our weight, we have health concerns, whatever. Kids don't want to eat that way. Let the kids eat, try to, and I was like this, I made all the baby food that my kids ever ate, so, because I thought the jar stuff wasn't good enough. We've all been paranoid. Now they're 16 and 12. I'm like, just have cereal for dinner. Or what. I mean, once in a while. I'm joking. But, fruits and vegetables, try to incorporate a little bit. If they only like one or two, that's fine. Just let them eat what they want. Protein, they need fat. They even need sugar. They need salt. The sodium requirements that we have in school lunches right now are ridiculous. There's no science to back it up. The food tastes awful. They're not eating it, and they're throwing it away, and they're going to be ruined forever. They will never eat vegetables because they are tasteless at school, because there's no salt on them. There's no fat on them. So if they want salt on it, or they want a little bit of butter on their green beans, or they want that's fine. That's not going to, it's not going to kill them. So worry less, cook, try to cook a few meals at home a week. That's what I would tell the moms who I taught cooking to. Pack lunches once in a while if they want on Friday to have school lunch as a treat. But it's a lot of, it's a lot of worry, responsibility. So don't be too hard on yourselves. Because then, they go to their friend's house and they have Pop-Tarts or whatever. And you're like, why did I just bother making you a vegetable omelet for breakfast? So, so good luck. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. I mentioned I'm trying to eat better, and so don't say the word donut again while I'm here, please. Killing me with that. Kale, yummy kale. Just a couple matters to wrap up before we let you go. And again, I appreciate you all being here tonight. I think that was a fantastic presentation by Julie. And let's give her one more round of applause. I think that was great. You might notice on your tables that there's a sheet like this with a nice pretty balloon and a picture of Ronald Reagan on it. And this is how you can kind of join the Heartland Institute, what I mentioned at the top of the show. I hope that you'll look it over and check some of these boxes, and we will be in touch with you. And of course, we always want to do better every single time, and so we have these little surveys on the tables to say, how did we do? And so if you could fill that out, we collect every single one of these, we put them in files, we look at these very carefully, and your suggestions on how to be better next time are taken seriously, and we incorporate them into our next event. Also, just another reminder, September 15th, a Thursday, at the Cotillion in Palatine, Illinois. We are honored to have the hilarious P.J. O'Rourke as our keynote speaker at our our anniversary benefit dinner this year, our 32nd anniversary benefit dinner. Early bird rates for tables and chairs, tables and seats, end at on July 31st. So if you want to get about a 20% discount on your purchase, please go to our website where you can go right to it, and you can purchase them online very securely, or you can just call 312-377-4000 and we'll take care of that for you. So we hope that you'll take advantage of these early bird rates right now. And also on your way out, we have a brand new card here, beautifully designed, which on the back shows our schedule for upcoming events here in this space, and mostly here in this space, and a couple elsewhere. So I hope you'll take it with you, maybe take a handful and share them with friends and have them passed around, and we'll make sure we keep this room filled every single time. Again, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's nice to see you all, and we'll see you next time. Good night.